This computer. Hi, everybody. Welcome to the Making More Money for You show. I am your host, Magnus Carter. The last show was all about IT and technology with Mark Medig, that turned actually author. And it's really interesting to see how his transformation in the IT world compared to my IT experiences and where it's going from there. A lot of AI, a lot of audio visual. And if you're interested in learning about getting into IT or looking to further your career, check out that episode. It's on all your streaming services. But this show is actually one I've been really looking forward to. The guests reached out after reading their bios and whatnot and seeing what they're all about. Is I believe that they're going to have a lot of great content for you today. It's it's a duo that you really wouldn't expect to actually happen. I have an HR professional, Brenda Neckbottle, and also William Branham.
Branham, you can do it. I
Branham,
believe in you.
Branham here, also as an ex former military Navy SEAL person. Guys, welcome to the show. Brenda,
Thanks
you're
for
on
having
mute.
us.
Thank you so much. Usually nobody goose up his name. It's always I'm the one getting butchered.
Well, well, we had our
That's
little
all good.
conversation
He
before,
just
but we
put
figured
so
it
much
out.
effort into the long neck bottle over there, Garth Brooks, and I got left behind because I was late getting on the show. I was working out audio, video stuff.
Yeah, you were having all the tech problems today. But
To include a flight being delayed.
oh, well, that happens everywhere nowadays, especially since COVID and whatnot. But we'll have that show for another show on
Ah,
flying and making money. But guys, welcome to the show. Honestly, how you know, I had HR people on and I had military people on the show, but never together. So how did you guys actually start working as I guess a team, if you will? I guess would be the proper terminology.
You want to
Brenda, you
answer
take
that
it.
one? You want me
You
to do
you
it?
take it. We met at a funeral. You go from there.
Yeah, we did. We met at a funeral. There's a mutual friend of ours, who actually was my business partner, and 4 days before we were launching our program, he passed away in a mountain bike accident. So there was another SEAL that flew in the day after I did from my area, from my neck of the woods. And I drove up to Salt Lake City, picked him up. We drove down to the viewing. We get down to the viewing, and he says, "Oh, by the way, Will's coming." And I'm like, "Great, who's Will?" And he's like, "Well, he's another SEAL." And he said he's coming in from Hawaii. And I was like, "Woo, cool." I'm like, "Was he East Coast guy, West Coast guy?" And they're like, "No, he was an East Coast guy." And I'm like, "Awesome." So Will gets there, and something to know about team guys and about SEALs is that they're very polite. Like, they're very civil for the most part. Will's
And
shaking his head. And but they're also like, their walls are up. They're very guarded. They don't let people in very quickly. So I started doing what I normally do, and that's pelting him like, "Hey, I understand you live in Hawaii." And he's like, "Yeah, I do." I said, "Where?" And he's like, "On this island." I said, "Yeah, I know where." And he's looking at me, and he goes, "Well, it's over here in this town." I'm like, "Yes, I understand that. Where?" And he's like, "Over by." I'm like, "Are you over by?" He says, "Yeah." And I said, "Well, my old home was 30 minutes, like 3 minutes away from your street." And he's like, "Really?" And I said, "Yeah." I said, "You're from East Coast, West Coast?" You're East Coast. And I said, "Do you know this person, this person, this person?" And then I just see him looking over at the other guy going like, "Who the hell is this?" And so
Get me out
that's
of here. Get me
how
out.
we worked. Yeah, that's how we met. So, and it dropped the wall pretty quick.
Well, then Brenda's like, "So, what do you think about being accountability partners?" I'm like, "Yeah, I don't even know what that means, but let's sure. I'm just getting into this entrepreneurial world. I have no idea what the hell I'm doing. So yeah, you got it. Let's do it."
You were
oh,
a
So
year,
we
you were a year out from retirement, weren't you? Like your first
no,
year.
I was retired.
Yeah, that's what I'm saying. You were your first year.
No, it was 2 years.
Oh, was it
Second,
2 years? Okay,
it
I
was
can't
yeah,
remember.
yeah. I retired in 18.
oh wow, okay. So accountability partners. So that's okay. We're gonna start into the corporate world of corporate aspect of this show is HR. So Brenda, what got you into HR and what got you out of HR to actually start doing this?
To get in and out.
Yep.
People.
So believe it or
Well,
not, first time I heard the concept of human resources, I wanted to say so far the day and hell away from it, because the way it was explained to me was managing benefits. And I thought, that is the most boring thing I have ever heard in my entire life. And it wasn't until actually I got into working at CarMax in 2021 that I realized that my whole retail career was full of HR already. And the more I actually saw a professional Fortune 500 operation working and a Fortune 500 HR team actually working together, and it really sparked my interest. So I had put in for my very first full-fledged HR job. I was a sprout at that point, really, and it just went from there. And CarMax was very progressive, and it allowed me. My boss really allowed me to honestly try so many different things. But he had a really awesome way about keeping me in my own swim lane, right? Instead of like completely going sideways. And one of the things that he would always ask is like, if you want to do this, is it going to help us sell more cars? And he would ask that of everybody. So that was really my first experience of being dialed in on core values and a number one primary business objective.
Okay. So, well, being in the military, being in the Navy, being selected to do SEALs and whatnot, do you find since you've exited the SEALs and started your way into corporate America, do you find a lot of your values and a lot of your training being useful for this, for your
Yeah.
transition?
Oh, no, 100%. When I originally started going down this road of sort of entrepreneurship and leadership coach and things like that, I didn't think there was a correlation between corporate and the military. It's absolutely every military unit
Oh,
is run kind of like a company.
okay.
Can you hear me? Is
Yep, I
audio
can hear
bad?
you. Just a little bit breaking up, but yeah, you're coming back fine.
Okay, right on. Yeah, and so all a corporation is just a high performing team. And let me reframe that. Every corporation is supposed to be a high performing
Supposed to
team.
be.
And so what I found is many corporations, many organizations don't, or they're not high performing teams because they're not focused on the team aspect of it. They're only focused on the making money aspect of it.
Right.
And the problem with that is you can only make as much money as how good your team is. And so if you want to make more money as an organization, you have to have a better team, or you have to train your current team to perform better. And that's why we are very successful in the SEAL teams, is because we have a very long selection process. We have a very long, we'll just call it an interview
Right.
process, a year and a half, 2 years, 3 years almost, to get into a SEAL platoon and get to your first deployment. But in that whole process, and even once you get into the SEAL platoon, in the SEAL teams, you're still training, you're still being evaluated, you're still being judged, you're still improving. And that's the problem that I see in corporate America is, you know, we organizations hire people, but they don't train them, and they don't try to, they don't work on professional development. They just say, all right, show up at this time, do this thing, and then, do it to the best of your ability, even though we don't even know what that is. And we're probably not going to train you, and we're not going to create the budget to train you, to make you better, a better leader, a better salesperson, a better whatever it is. And so once I figured that part out, the transition from, what I learned in the military to what I do in corporate America is very seamless.
Okay. Yeah, to your point, I see that a lot of even in the jobs that I've taken, because I'm an IT engineer by trade and whatnot. They would expect me to do so much work, but once I hit that glass ceiling, they wouldn't want me to, take that plunge and go past that. They just want me in my little cubicle, my little box there. And it's like, well, if you decide to quit, we'll just hire somebody else. And then
Right.
honestly, every time that I've left that job, they would find 2 or 3 people to replace me. And that seems to be the internal aspect. Brenda, when you were in HR, how much turnover did you see because of those issues that Will has actually described and what I have actually seen?
Well, that kind of depends, because initially, first off, the industry that I worked in when I first started is in retail. So retail naturally has a very high turnover, and
Okay.
statistically across the United States, 40%. You're going to find a lot of the same things that we're talking about exist in small business as well. And so when I left CarMax, I was actually part of a reduction in force.
Okay.
And one of the things that I did is I managed the entire corporation's president club, their whole rewards program. And what I heard through the Coconut Wireless after I left was that it actually that they didn't extrapolate enough information from me, and it took 4 people to figure out what one person did. So in other aspects of what I've done, I've also been in small business, but at the end of the day, to be honest with you, so it's a hard question to answer, to be honest, just because it's wide variety of experience.
Right.
So between consulting and small business, it doesn't, if you don't have a plan of what it is that you want in that seat, you're going to the company's going to experience what they experienced when you left, like consistently, right? And it's very inefficient, it's very ineffective. I talk when sometimes when I talk, I'll tell people it's like, hiring is like dating. It really can be. But if you don't know what it is that you want, you're not going to get the very best outcome. And once you marry the employee, you have to continuously nurture that relationship. And I think that's the miss right there. Not just in big company, it's also in small company too. We are actively looking for people with the skills, the knowledge, and the talent and the ability to put cheeks in the seats, and that's great. But unless you continue to develop that relationship and you understand what's intrinsically important to that person and marry it up to what's extrinsically important to the company, then you're misfiring like consistently. And it is sometimes a full-time job. So sometimes leaders get so focused in on driving the business that they forget that the oil and gas that makes the combustion are the very people that you worked very hard to find.
And I noticed that even a lot of companies that I've seen nowadays that I've interacted with, either working or consulting or whatnot, is they're outsourcing it because they really don't know what they want anymore. They don't know what they need, and they're sending it
Yep.
out to these tech firms that are trying to get anything with a pulse to answer. And that interview process is long and lengthy enough, and a lot of disappointment when the person actually does take the job and it's absolutely not what they expected.
Yep.
So,
Yep.
um,
Absolutely.
A big problem I see in corporations is they will hire based off of what the resume says or based off a degree that someone has, what school they went to, something like that, and not on the actual capabilities of the individual. And so I see that as a huge failure a lot of times in organizations in leadership. They don't hire the right people. They hire a piece of paper.
right.
They
Yep.
hire a credential
Yep.
rather than actual capabilities.
And a lot of that, I'm going to tag on to what Will is saying. Believe it or not, a lot of that is at the mercy of technology. So we have these applicant tracking systems now, which, yeah, do help actually streamline workflow. However, when the person who's manning that technology is 100% relying on it, rather than looking at it as a vehicle to get the data and then challenge the data to a degree, right? So there's like 3 buckets typically in an applicant tracking system. And your A bucket is where the keywords match, right? They look great on paper, kind of a thing. And then your B bucket are the people that are capable of doing the work. However, maybe what they've done, the words that they're using in their resume or their titles or something doesn't necessarily align with what the system is programmed in. People are not programmed to look in the B bucket to see if the trainable talent is actually in there. And so that in and of itself, that critical thinking element is now pretty much gone. When you look at a resume, and most people, like Will's right, most people will hire off of a resume. But here's a little trick. I always pair up a resume against a job application. And the
Okay.
reason why I do that is that I'm looking for behaviors in an actual application, because that is a condition of an employment, not a resume. Resume is just a billboard. So if you compare what's in a resume, and if it doesn't match what's on the application, now you got some behaviors that you're actually starting to see. And it's a mismatch. And it means that somebody's taking a shortcut. Don't ever get me looking at an application that says see resume on the work experience because they're automatically gone. I just asked you to put your best foot forward. This is all the mindset of recruiting, of building a high performing team. I just asked you to do something, and what you just taught me that you do is come up with a shortcut. That's not a high performer. That's somebody that's looking for the path of least resistance.
Yes, and that actually, I've noticed that actually in my current position that I'm doing is intern season's finally upon us. So we have two different interns, night and day, and exactly what you're saying is you give them a task to do, even s- something simple as fill this paper out the way you want it filled out, just to make sure they can follow the instructions, that they understand what they're doing, and they understand the data that they're actually going to present to you.
Yep.
The one Knight, we'll just refer to him as Knight. He will actually ask me. He's like, well, how do I do this? He's like, well, what does that mean? Why don't you tell me what this is? And then I tell him exactly the reasoning why I don't do that. He's like, oh, so you don't know the answer to it. And it's it steamrolls and it snowballs down there, and you can tell right from your mannerisms that you guys have probably seen, especially when you go on site to talk to people, is you know who to focus on and who not to focus on. Am I correct?
That's a Brenda question. That's not a me question.
No, that's a you question too. I mean, listen,
That's
don't get out of it. No, think about it. I mean, look at naval special warfare, right? I mean, look how fast you guys can cycle through people that don't match, they don't level up.
Well, there's a screening process. It doesn't matter if you're a SEAL, if you're a support person. It
Right.
doesn't matter. There's a screening process, an interview process, a resume process. And again, people look good on paper. Sometimes they even interview really well,
right.
Yep.
but it's not until the rubber meets the road that the true colors are shown. When you add a little bit of stress. I mean, I remember my very first coaching client before he was a coaching client. He just reached out to me. He was like, "Hey, man, can you give me some ideas on how to interview people better? Because they all show up and they all sound good and whatever." And so I'm like, okay, give them a problem that's not solvable, and see how they react to that. And
Mhm.
so I went, over, I'm like, so what are you trying to do? He's trying to hire salespeople. Okay, so give them these scenarios. Let's work through different scenarios, and some of them have nothing to do with sales.
Right.
But at the end of the day, the problem is not solvable. Give them solvable problems, but at the end of the day, like final question, and make them scratch their head when they leave, or even give them a few days to answer the question, depending on what the scenario is, what the position is, things like that. And maybe come back and say, okay, like the second or third interview, like what's the answer to the problem that we gave you?
See if they
And
actually get it.
see what they come up with.
Right.
Sometimes they come up with some crazy creative something. Okay, that might be someone who's thinking outside the box that you might want to consider hiring. If they're like, it's not a solvable problem, I couldn't figure it out, they just gave up, hands in the air, maybe not the person you want working for you. I want people who are going to think differently.
Yep.
Outside the status quo.
And with thinking like that is you I know in the SEALs and in corporate world is from what I understand and from talking to other people in the military, it's okay to fail. Because how else are you am I right, is how else are you gonna learn unless you don't fail?
Yeah, failure is required. If you're not failing, you're not trying hard enough. If you're not falling down, you're not falling on your face, you're not trying hard enough. You're being mediocre. And so failure is just part of the process. Then you know where your limits are, then you know the things you need to work on. Okay, I failed here, here, and here. Those are the things I need to focus on. And then the next time, maybe I fail in a different area. That's okay. And leadership needs to know that too. Like if you're failing because of being complacent, that's one thing. But if you're failing because you're leaning forward, you're trying hard, you're trying new things, you're trying new systems, you're trying to be innovative, and you fail, that's just part of the process. If you
Right.
fail because you're being complacent or entitled, that's a different scenario. But as a leader, I
Oh,
encourage failure. I encourage innovation. I encourage my team pushing the limits of what we think the answer is. Let's keep pushing until we break it, and then back up and fix it, and then push it again until we break it again. And that's how you get better.
I agree. And that's also an elimination of one thing that you don't do the next time around. So you
Correct.
already know
Yep.
that answer. It's like, okay, that you're saving time. And in both worlds that you guys worked in and lived in, is time is very crucial. Time can be life and death situation. Um, maybe not so much in the corporate aspect, but time lost time equals lost profits.
100%.
Yep. I would agree.
So, well, that's one of the great things that even talking with you guys, uh, seeing the diversity here, but there's way too many more similarities than the diversification of what you guys did as as a position, but because you had to get a job done. So that's very impressive. Out of one of the hardest things that you guys had to do, we have a couple minutes before we go on break, is what's one thing that you've done in your career that you looked that you can look back now at on and say, okay, I'm glad this actually happened to me. Like one event.
Oh, I'm trying to think of all the failures that I've had as a leader. Um, I remember one specific failure as a leader. I was teaching sniper school, and one of my other instructors came to me and he was like, "Hey, man, I can't figure out these radios, these whatever. Like things just weren't working because radios and water and computers. It's not like the iPhone is so much more capable or the Android or whatever than what we had back in the day doing satellite communication, sending imagery over satellite stuff and figuring out how to crop photos and do all these things. And one of my guys was pretty good at comms, so I put him in charge of teaching that aspect of the reconnaissance part of being a sniper and things like that. And he came to me one night and he was like, "Hey man, I can't figure this thing out. I'm having a hard time." And I was busy doing something else. And I was like, "You need to just go figure it out because that's your job. Just go figure it." That's not leadership. That's passing the buck. He came to me asking for help. There was a guy, or there were several guys in the class that were better at comms than we were, because that's their thing back in the platoon, but they are also a sniper. And so what I should have done as a leader is said, go find Jared or Tom or whoever who we knew were really good with this specific system, and have them come and teach you how to do it so you can go back and teach it, or even have them teach the class. I mean, we lose, trying to maintain credibility as sniper instructors.
Mhm.
A lot of times maintaining that credibility is empowering the junior personnel. Like, hey, they're actually better at this, and that shows discipline, and that shows respect, and that shows like we're all on the same team. Just because I'm in a position of authority and you're a subordinate or you're a student doesn't mean that you don't know more than me in some aspects of it. And that's where a lot of leaders fail. They think that they have to know everything. And when leaders can be humble and say, you know what, I don't actually know how to solve this problem. Who here can help solve this problem? Then you actually get more credibility as a leader than you do if you just act like you know the problem or know the solution and then fail in delivering the solution. So that was that one failure has stuck with me years, like almost 20 years now.
Wow.
Like I still feel bad about like how I talked to that guy.
You call him up and apologize?
If I had his number, I would.
Well, maybe he'll listen in.
Yeah, there you go. So to answer your question, it's funny. It's like this was the one team that I was most excited to work with, and found out that it was an absolute hellacious nightmare. I would never want to go back into that situation, and it was literally 3 years of hell. And one of the things that this team is actually what taught me about group dynamics. And I was going through and finishing my degree in human resources at the time, and I started focusing in on organizational development, and then I saw how those two work together, and that's how I got into becoming a group dynamic specialist. Is you become a specialist with what you experience, right? And so that's what happened to me. And I had a group that just, they were very unified, and then I was the outsider that came in. And even though they had very, very high expectations of what I do, I also came in from a different aspect of the company. And so I had a very different view of what was happening in the organization, and I was primed differently than they were, you know? So, but one of the things that I learned is that when you have people who are constantly changing the rules, and it's not always the boss,
No.
then you're in a never-ending no-win situation, and you just have to it's a real confidence builder. It'll knock you down on your confidence, but it'll build you up at the same time. And so that in and of itself is the definition of toxicity amongst a team. And even though part of the team is cohesive, if you have the team that is starting to push one more person out, your team really isn't cohesive, you know?
Okay.
So I had a
Yeah.
lot of skill and a lot of talent, and I was constantly being made wrong for stuff.
No, I can attest to that. I've been in your situation, you
Yeah.
know, extremely did well. The higher ups loved me, customers loved me, but the immediate supervisor found any which way possible to degrade me in front of people, make sure I was wrong, you know, take me off projects. I can definitely attest to that. And honestly, you're right. It did make me a better person because I can actually view that and know my talents were better elsewhere. And leaving that position was much,
Yeah.
much better.
And for me, it wasn't so much that the big guy, the boss, was degrading, is what happens that the team was doing it,
Right.
and he wouldn't lead through it. He wouldn't lead anybody through it. Because he would listen to both sides, and there was zero action whatsoever, like none. And it pissed everybody off. So, I mean, that's a no-win situation. And when I was let go, he and two other high-level leaders were called into a meeting, and they never returned. And I had access to his calendar, and I'm like, yeah, he's done. And that means that I'm directly attached to him. So I picked up the phone, I started calling people. I'm like, hey, listen, I think it's happening. And literally within 9 days, I was one of the few people in the United States at that time in 2009. I was one of the 10, I was part of that 10% layoff.
Okay.
And I was less than 1% that actually had a job within a week.
Wow. Okay.
So yeah. In
No,
Hawaii, they call that one smart bugger. Ask
uh,
Will, he knows.
I don't know anything. I don't leave my house.
you know,
Whatever.
I'm a homebody.
oh wow. I can't believe it, guys. The first half of the show is already over. We've covered a lot of great topics, a lot of great contents in already half the show. Right now, we're actually going to take a short break. Everybody, thank you for dialing in. You know, we are talking about uh, lessons learned from HR and from the military and from Brenda and Will. So we're going to continue more into this and see what their future plans are. So if you're tuning in, thanks for tuning in. If you're still here, we'll be right back. Hi, everybody. Welcome back to the show. I'm your host, Magnus Carter. You are on the Making More Money for You show. This is a very specific and very entertaining show. I have William Brenham and Brenda Neckbottle here. See, I got both your names this time. It only took a couple tries, but we're talking about how Will's military life and how Brenda's HR experience and being in the corporate world and everything came together. And we're actually going to talk about they're actually doing like seminars and whatnot and trainings and also a book that's coming out called Mission Ready. And it's about building high performance teams from the battlefield to the boardroom. Guys, welcome back to the show.
Thanks for having us.
Thank you.
Absolutely.
Stoked.
Absolutely. You know, a very unlikely pairing here of military and HR people. And, you know, we have two different worlds coming together, but in all in the same aspect of it, you guys are united to a certain cause of actually building better people, building better teams, building better corporations, whether it's small mom and pop shops all the way up to the corporate level. Am I right?
Correct.
Yeah.
So when you go out and start doing this, do you have your curriculums? I'm sure is based on what you've learned throughout your careers. Can you expand a little bit on, how long this would be? What constitutes, well, first of all, what constitutes a high performing team?
You get to answer that one first.
Oh, you want me to answer that?
Yeah, you go first.
Oh, okay. So a high performing team is a team that works together,
Okay.
in in um I wanted to say in search. I'm blanking on words right now. In performance of a very specific mission. So earlier, Brenda, you talked about when you were at CarMax, your boss was like, is this going to help us sell more cars? Is this going to help us sell more cars? Very mission focused.
Yep.
And so that leader was really pushing for high performing teams to sell more cars, to create more profits.
Right.
That's what a high performing team is. You have it starts at the top, at the leadership, driving the team to work cohesively to a very specific outcome. I think that's a better definition. I wasn't prepared for that. I don't know why I wasn't prepared for it, but I clearly was not.
That's okay. And too, is that not only are high performing teams dialed in on a specific outcome, leaders are actually utilizing to full advantage the skills, talents, and attributes of every member on that team. And when a high performing team focuses in on what they're best at, it's not work. And there's a lot of satisfaction that comes with winning when you're doing something that you're really good at.
Okay. That's those are great definitions of it. I'm glad we specify that, because every corporation has a different what high performance is. Whether you show up all the time, that's high performance, or whether you're at or show up at all.
If that's the metric of showing up, that's the very very low standards right there. We need to elevate those standards.
That's
Exactly.
management. That's not leadership. That's management.
Oh, right. Well, that also brings up another great question: is what determines titles reflect what you're supposed to be doing, but a lot of leaders in teams and whatnot aren't the management aspect of it. So, what are some great quality traits or qualifications that you think would make a good leader in the corporate America when you're working with somebody?
So there's a distinct difference between a leader and a manager. Managers, they check boxes. They check boxes because they know that something has to get done and it's their job to make sure that it gets done. A leader is an individual that actually leads the way to getting the most important things accomplished, the things that help move the business forward. A manager may make sure that things are done, but they don't necessarily have the skill set or the desire to actually influence people as to understanding the why behind what it is that they do, the importance that they play. And from everybody within the organization, from top brass all the way down to your frontline employees, every person's actions plays a role in making sure that the company is living up to its number one responsibility, and it's not making profit. It's bringing in money so that they can keep the doors open to make payroll. That's the responsibility of a business. And so when managers lose sight of that, then you're not leading. You're just checking boxes.
So when I think about a leader, I like some of the key attributes that I look for are they a good listener?
Hmm?
Can they can they observe the battlefield? And when I say the battlefield, I mean business. What's going on? What's going on with the team, with the organization, with the employees, with the technology, with whatever? What's going on with the customers that we're serving? What's going on with our competition, the enemy? And can I maneuver my team accordingly to what the battlefield is telling me? And every time I maneuver on the battlefield, the business field, the battlefield, my perspective changes, and I have to have a good idea of what's going on. A lot of times when people are talking about leadership, or they are, like as Brenda said, talking about managing people. That is a piece of leadership, but that's not really the whole thing. Leadership is about driving the culture, create the culture, drive the culture. You are the leader. You are what everyone is looking to for the answers, even if you don't have the right answers. Sometimes you're the part of motivation. You're you are the person that they come back to for what is our mission again? What direction are we driving? People are always looking to you for direction. And sometimes your job is to like not micromanage. It's to stand back, let people go forward and fail, and 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 then see how they recover. That's good leadership. Let them fail. Detach from the scenarios, detach from a lot of the emotional stuff that happens with employees, with subordinates. You know, you'll have like, and this really goes down to the HR piece of it. And what most people don't know is, because I was a senior enlisted leader in the military and the SEAL teams, my job was people and tactics and managing my leaders. And so that's exactly what an HR professional does. When, Brenda had me on her podcast long ago, she was asking me about, how does being a senior enlisted leader in the SEAL teams, transfer to, the human resources. I'm like, what the hell is human resources? I don't even know. But really, it's just managing people.
Yeah.
And so when we started talking, I was like, oh, there's a direct correlation. So leadership is not specifically managing people, but a lot of times it is. But it's also listening to people. It's being a subject matter expert in some area. It's about observing the battlefield. It's about maneuvering your team, your company, your forces on the battlefield to beat the enemy, to make as much money as humanly possible.
Okay.
That's what leadership is about.
Yeah. I would also add too is that, there's some more differences between management and leadership. And I agree totally 100% with what Will's talking about. But like managers, they tend to only use what they have, where leaders tend to leverage competencies. And we see that in the SEAL team specifically. They know how to plug and play their people better than anybody else. If they need a breacher, then they're going to go grab a breacher, and they're going to grab a specific one to manage and deal with a specific situation, right? They also
I'm not a bleacher, but I'll blow a bunch of doors up.
You're
I'll
not a
blow holes in the
bleacher
wall. I'm not a bleacher nor a breacher,
or sniper. You're a
but I'll
sniper.
blow some stuff up. I don't
There
care.
you go. Right. Managers tend to also like work within limits, where leaders tend to foster development. And these are the things that we specifically see too in corporate, is that managers tend to solve problems that aren't really theirs. Whereas leaders, they challenge the team to create solutions. And managers tend to fall into that trap of micromanaging, whereas leaders, like I said, they lead the way.
I can go like 10 different directions with this. I'm trying to figure out which
Deep
one is
thoughts.
going to be the best for the
Deep
next
thoughts with
for the next one.
Magnus Carter.
It's a very long subject, but when we're talking about this, is how important, how often do you see this failing, this type of culture failing, when you're working with these companies, that they fail to take it out of their war room or leadership or boardroom and actually implement what they actually want to do?
How often do we see them fail?
Well, failure to follow through with their plans. Like they have this great strategy in their boardroom, okay?
Right.
And it's like, okay, we have everything drawn out, we have everything here, we have the plans, we have our timelines, we have people we want to do it, and we the potential outcomes that will come out of it, but they fail to execute it. They don't execute it at all. But it was just more or less a show, instead of actually bringing the plan to perdition.
Well, like Wayne Gretzky said, you miss 100% of the shots you don't take. So you can have the best plan in the world, but if you don't take action on that plan, you're going to have 100% failure
Exactly.
on that plan.
Okay. But have you
But if
seen?
but if they take that plan and they start implementing it, take it down to the lower levels and say, hey, let's start implementing this.
Mhm.
The first thing to do is get feedback from the team. A lot of times leaders will, like in the boardroom, they'll like, all right, here's the plan, here's what we're going to do, here's whatever, but they don't ask for feedback from the team. Actually, there's a client right now I'm talking to where he's working for a very large company, a large bank, and they're going to make some big changes, and he's part of the changes, but he can't tell the subordinates, like the people who are going to work for him, what those changes are. Everybody knows changes are coming.
Right.
And so, some of the things I'm doing with him is, asking him, like telling him to just go start getting feedback, hypothetical feedback from people who are going to be affected by these changes. See what those changes are going to be. How would get their feedback so he can get ahead of, potential obstacles that he'll face once these changes are put into place. Now he doesn't have to give the whole thing away, but just like, hey, hypothetically speaking, and he can lay out like real world scenarios that are definitely going to happen, and then lay out scenarios that potentially will happen, so that no one really knows what's coming. So there's still an element of surprise, but at least he gets feedback on potential trip hazards that they're going to run into once they make all of these changes.
Okay.
So start doing a little bit of a dirt dive. Start getting some initial feedback from the employees.
And what I've experienced, like in the Fortune 500 world, is that today we're looking at this project, which we think is going to help move the company forward. And then while you're working on something like that, there's a shift in the economy, or there's a shift in product need, or something has come up. And what employees can often get very frustrated with is the fact that shifting priorities actually now take the work that they've done and move it totally aside, because that may not necessarily line up with the need for the business today. Doesn't mean that it wouldn't. Years ago, I helped create a couple of tools that were to help companies that were government contractors. And when we kicked that project off, it was like, yes, this is absolutely important. And then something happened, and all of a sudden we had to address, look, in HR, employment law changes, and sometimes we can be up against really big changes. And then that's exactly what had happened in the situation. A new law came into effect. It was impacting in a very broad reach within our organization, and we had to, by compliance wise, deal with that. So my project got shelved. It actually never got breath again, even when I reapproached it. Or the other piece is that sometimes we just don't sell ourselves well enough. We don't sell, the idea or the project as a business solution. And it goes back to the question that, my old boss was, it's like, does it help us, sell or achieve X? And if it doesn't, then it's not the right solution for that time. And not everybody recognizes that. And so a really strong leader is going to say, listen, it's not that we don't appreciate the effort, but right now the sands are shifting, and that's what we have to focus in on. I got something new for you. Let's get after it. It's a whole new day.
Okay. Well, that brings me up to my next topic. My next good question is, there are so many different corporate trainings out there. Like the seven habits of highly effective people. And the list goes on and on and on and on. What sets yours, your mission ready learning style and implementations apart from what's out there? What does your curriculum or your talks and your trainings bring to companies that they can't get anywhere else?
You want me to go on that one, or you want to go?
Well, I will. I'll start it off, and then you can go, and maybe I'll finish it. So one of the aspects that I bring to the table from my background is I like to lead. I like to teach leadership through the lens of a gunfight. And so a gunfight is the most stressful leadership scenario that you can possibly be in. When you're leading men and women in a gunfight, there has to be absolute teamwork. There has to be perfect communication. There has to be, I like to say, multitask like a Navy SEAL. There's the bottom line is there's no such thing as multitasking. When you're in a gunfight, there's three things that matter. You have to be able to shoot, you have to be able to move, and you have to be able to communicate. And you can't do any one of those things effectively while trying to do any of the other things. So bringing that aspect of everybody says about the same thing. We bring a very different kind of polarizing uh, and easy to pay attention to aspect to leadership and team building training because we're not boring and
No,
and
no, you're not.
and everyone else is saying the same thing. Everyone else is like, you know, they're everyone is using some aspects of Stephen Covey. Everyone is using aspects of whatever else is out there, and very few people are using like high dynamic. Like, let's figure out how to make people pay attention. And it's like, it's easy. Like, I hated in the military, I hated all the like GMT, general military training things, all the online stuff, all the everything. It was all boring, and it was always, I was like, this is a waste of my time.
Mhm.
But anytime that I could be interactive with someone, when they would bring someone in to like teach us how to do stuff and actually teach us skills that we're going to use, not just do the status quo, hit, you know, listen to the thing, or put the, you know, put the training on mute so I can do my actual job and then come back and answer the questions at the end. All that stuff is generally a waste of time. Sometimes there's compliance things that you have to do, but if you actually want to teach people how to be better and how to be better leaders and how to lead high performing teams and how teams can become high performing teams, you need to have people who have actually done that to
Yeah.
come in and teach it so that you can actually have real world experience. Like, you know, when we were, I remember a deployment to Iraq, the team that was deployed, they were like, hey, you need to figure out how to climb buildings in an urban environment, because we're like making it up as we go over here. You're going to be more effective on the battlefield. So what did we do? We went out and hired the best climbers in the world to teach us how to climb buildings in an urban environment. What is the equipment we need? What are the tools we need? What are the tactics, or what are the techniques that we need? And we took those techniques and then we implemented our tactics, and then we went overseas and we were very successful because we knew what we needed to do. We hired the best people in the world to teach us how to do it. They gave us the tools to and the skills to go execute the mission, and then we went and executed the mission. But it's because we knew what the problem was, and therefore we went and found the best people in the world to teach us how to solve those problems.
Yeah, and
And it wasn't an online course.
yeah, and Will nailed it. I mean, we've been there. You know, I mean, the SEAL team's the most elite in the military. And, you know, I come from a background where, you know, we were fiercely competitive. We were setting company records. You know, we were winning awards. I mean, you don't do that when you're average, you know. That just doesn't happen. And so we understand what people are feeling, and we have a tendency to naturally very connect to the experiences that they're sharing with us, and connect our experiences to them. So basically what we're doing is we're actually meeting folks where they are and helping to build them up. You know, our goal is to transform their experience from seeing what they're currently doing to what's possible, and then watch them organically actually take everything and launch, because we just want to see people win. That's all we do. Like when we start our meetings, like we still meet that whole accountability partner thing. We still do that every week. And the very first thing that we ask is, all right, so what's going on? And all right, what are the wins? And if one of us or both of us or whatever is just kind of in a funk, or we're just going through stuff, because we're human too, and we go through our stuff immediately. Like one time I remember I called Will. I went through some really hard stuff for a while, and I was just bummed. And I called him up one day and I'm like, look, dude, I'm licking the curb right now and I'm reaching out. And he's like, okay, so name 3 wins that you've had today. And I said, waking up. And he goes, that's one. What's next? You know, I mean, it's just like, we'll meet you where you are, and we're going to help you reframe how you see what you're doing, so that way you can win. That's what we want. We want you to win. Winning's awesome.
I like winning. You know,
It's freaking great.
And that's impressive. And that's what we need more out there nowadays, especially in the economy and whatnot, to keep going. We're almost out of time. I have one last question for each of you. Is if you had any, what is the one piece of wisdom that you have learned throughout your journey that you would go back in time to tell yourself when you began this journey?
Hmm.
I would say never.
Yeah.
And and what I mean by that is, I have my, I'll just start from childhood. I always said that I would never join the Navy. Well, guess what? You can't become a Navy SEAL unless you join the Navy. When I retired from the military, I said, I'm never going to be in sales. I'm never going to be one of those weird life coachy, whatever people. And I'm never going to be on stage going rah, 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 like trying to motivate people because I'm like, I have no message. I don't know what any of that stuff means. I do all of those things now. Well, I joined the Navy to become a Navy SEAL. I sell everything from CBD to books to coaching to speaking to you name it. I sell it, and because sales is a very critical skill for making money.
Yes.
And I stand on stages and I go rah 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 all over the world. So I would say never. If someone challenges you, accept the challenge and go forth and crush it.
I think for me, if I look back in my life to my early 20s, like I saw the world in a certain way, in a certain filter. And if I could go back and coach my 20-year-old self, I would teach that person that life isn't what you actually think it is. It's actually better. Um, your path to getting to what you believe is the best is not what you think. So, one, trust the process, and two, don't cut yourself short of learning opportunity. And not that I didn't, but I certainly wasn't as open to it as I could have been.
Wow, those are both powerful statements there, and I'm sure everybody out there listening can take something from both of those or either one of them. So, guys, I hate to say it, but we are out of time.
That
How
was
can
fast.
It was extremely fast. A lot of content. We covered so many different topics and in detail, from corporate America, starting out small mom and pops, to your careers and everything in between. How can my listeners get a hold of you or learn that want to take the next step,
So the
whatever they
best
want to
place
do?
to find us is through our website. If you want to learn more, you mentioned that we have our book coming out. We're pretty excited about that. But where the best place to start is missionreadyleadership.com. If you want to learn about, you sign up. That's the best thing to do because we've got all sorts of fun information that's coming out. If you want to find us on social media, you can do that. You can find Will, was just go by William Branham. Google him. He's one of there's not very many William Branhams in the world. And there's only one Brenda Neckvaddle. So I've made it really easy. If you want to connect with me, then you can connect with me at yobrenda.com or hashtag Dear Brenda. Either one, you'll be able to find me on social media that way. I just made it easy and just Yo Brenda. It's like Adrian from, Yo Adrian from Rocky. Kind of made it really, really simple. Well, every time Will answers the phone, he always says yo, and I think that's probably what got me into thinking Yo Brenda versus Rocky. So I'll give you the credit, Will, for that one.
You're welcome. I mean, thank you. I don't know. I don't know what to say anymore.
You're welcome. I don't know what
I slept 2.5 hours on a plane last night, so my brain is not 100%.
That's okay. It's all good. It gets really entertaining when Will's exhausted, let me tell you. But as you can clearly see,
I can still perform.
Yes,
that's right.
top notch.
You can clearly perform. But so that's really the best way to find us. I mean, we're pretty easy to spot.
Well, guys, I appreciate your time and thank you for being on the show. There's lots of life learning experiences here, and lots to take from this show and put into everyone's lives out there. Everybody, thank you for tuning in. If you haven't tuned in, or you tuned in late, go back. It's going to be syndicated on all the major platforms. Go back from the beginning. Guaranteed you missed something very valuable and very important. I am your host, Magnus Carter, with the Making More Money for You show. Thank you for everything. And until next time, get out, live some life, and turn off the technology.
Turn it off.